If you're only learning from watching YouTube videos when it comes to programming, you might be sabotaging yourself. Now, here's why. When you're watching YouTube videos, you're learning targeted information. But when you start working on your own projects, most of that targeted information doesn't apply and you don't know how to actually find what you're looking for on your own. That's where ChatGPT comes into play. If you don't know what ChatGPT is, there are a lot of videos out there, but the quickest explanation is Google on steroids. So this will transfer into other things outside of programming, but just for the video's sake, let's say that we wanted to learn how to make a game in Python. We have knowledge of Python. We know the basics and fundamentals of Python, but that's about it. Let's head over to ChatGPT or chat.openai.com and we'll ask the question of how to make a game in Python. Now, it'll take its sweet turtle time and start typing it out for you. Now, it does give us multiple options, but we're going to stick with Pygame because that one's a little bit more popular. Since we know that we want to use Pygame, the next question is, well, how do you make a Mario game in Pygame? Now, for the most of this video, we will be skipping the typing part just so that it doesn't go on too long because again, it takes forever. Now, feel free to pause the video because a lot of this will be summarized. So it does give us a step-by-step guide of how we can make a Mario game. But before you work on any project, you do need to plan it. So this is not an advertisement. Let's jump over to Milano so we can start structuring our game. First, we'll create a new board and we'll call this ChatGPT Mario. Then we need to create a column. This will be our game plan column where we plan everything. The first thing we want to do is say that we're going to make our Mario sprite, then maybe a ground. This is not going to be as detailed as it should be in a real project, but this list should suffice. Now we need to create the Mario sprite. So let's hop over to Google. We'll pick out a sprite. This one looks great. And since this video is targeted towards free, we're going to use the program that everyone loves, Paint. Now I know as programmers, we mostly don't do art, but it is good to know just the general ideas of how art is done. This is your blocking stage. You use basic shapes just to get the general idea of the shape of the character. Then you go back over your basic shapes, kind of filling in the lines to give it more detail to the actual shape of the character. And we end up with this amazing looking character. Now, if you recall, the first part was to install Pygame. Now, we can hop over to the official webpage and go through their installation process, or we can go over to PyPy, just copy the install and paste that in our terminal, which is what I'm going to do. But I've already installed it previously. Now, we need to load a character and we don't know how. So back over to ChatGPT, let's ask the question of how do we load a character? Hopefully you're starting to see the difference in learning with ChatGPT versus learning versus a YouTube video. You actually need to know the questions that you're looking for before you can get an answer. Now, it might be compelling to just copy and paste, but do not do that. Trust me when I say that you will retain so much more when you actually manually type. So if you look at the initialize, we don't actually have a window. So next we should actually ask, well, how do we create that window before we add the character to a window that doesn't exist? And you may run into issues like this one. You can usually just refresh it and that for the most part will fix your issue. Then we could just repeat our previous question. So we get an example of the code that we're going to manually type out for retention, but we also get a detailed explanation that we can read to understand what the code is doing. Now, I do encourage you to follow along with your own ChatGPT. Now, following our skeleton, we need to import Pygame. Then we need to initialize Pygame. After we initialize it, we then need to set the window size. Next, let's go ahead and set the Pygame.display to the window size we just set up. Now let's set our caption to Mario game. That all out the way, now we can go ahead and run the game. So we need a Boolean for running to check if the game is running. Then we'll create an infinite while loop. Now we do need an event system. If you're not familiar with this, make sure you are reading documentation. The most beneficial part about this is that it does push you towards reading documentation. Next, we need to update the display throughout the loop, so we'll call that. And finally, we'll do our pygame.quit when the application is done. So I did not want to edit this part out. When I first ran it, it did not run for me. I went through the code a couple of times and I didn't see anything wrong with it. I went back and forth and again, didn't see anything wrong with it, but eventually it popped up and I was like, okay, I guess a reset fixed it. Now, if you remember, we did go out of order because it did not provide us with the window information. Now we already have the information to load the Mario character. Let's call image.load so that we can load our Mario.png. Then we'll go ahead and create a sprite for it using this .sprite.sprite. We can set the image for the sprite to the image we just loaded. Then we need to set up the rectangle by getting the image rectangle. Now we do want to set up our start position, so we can go ahead and set up our Mario.rectX to be 50 and then our rectY to also be 50. And for this last part, we need to go ahead and set up a sprite group, and then we'll go ahead and add Mario to that sprite group. So when working in Pygame, you do have to draw the image even after you added the image. So let's go ahead and use the all sprites.draw, and it looks like our image is just too big. So let's head back over to ChatGPT and we'll ask it more of a specific question. How to control the image size. The image is too large, so we're not only asking a question, we're giving it details of why we're asking the question. So it looks like the only thing we need to include is the image.getRect and specify that we want to divide it by 2. That's not too bad. Now let's add that little addition, but we'll make one little tweak to that transform.scale. Instead of giving the specific information they said, let's see what it does if we give just plain hard-coded numbers. And it looks like our image is just not proportional. We'll go ahead and fix that and add the actual width divided by 2 and the height divided by 2. And that's a whole lot better, but it's still too big. So let's kind of play with the numbers until we get a size that we kind of like. I think 12 is probably going to be my best number. And to finish off, make sure you're checking off your game plan. We've made our sprite. Next is going to be the ground floor. So this is a great point to stop the video. If you have enjoyed the first episode to the series, definitely leave a like and possibly subscribe. If there's something you saw that I did wrong or something you can do better, definitely leave it in the comment section below because we're all growing. Now, normally that's where I would stop this video. If you are a creator of any kind, a writer, a musician, an artist, a programmer, and you're interested in working with other creators, I have created a Discord for just that. If you're interested, I'll leave my Twitter down in the description below. Just shoot me a message. I'll be joining Instagram and TikTok soon, but not just yet.